Hello champions and future champions, hello ChessMood family. Cem Gabujan is here with you, and in this video we are going to summarize daily lesson test answers for the September month. Let's go ahead and get started. Position that you are seeing on the board is the test for the daily lesson exchange the main defender. It's white to move and we are going to attack. We can notice that black bishop on g6 is successfully protecting opponent's king through this diagonal and as well thread through the g file. That's why we need to get rid of this bishop, and white now plays bishop d1, knight f7 and bishop c2. Black cannot allow us to take because in that case the pawn structure will be spoiled and we can be mating through the h file. That's why after bishop c2, black is deciding to take, queen c2, and now white is getting a very strong attack here. After rook g8, we go rook to h3. Now queen h7 is a checkmate threat. And after g6, white's getting this knight f6 square, attacking the rook, the pawn. The other rook is joining through the g file, and because of all of these reasons, white is winning very soon. Idea was to exchange opponent's good defender bishop in this game. Now let's go ahead and see the next example. This is a test position for the daily lesson multifunctional move. It's white to move, and here we are going a4. What's the idea? We're fixing weakened pawn on a5 square. With a4 we're getting this b5 outpost for our pieces. And most importantly, we're getting chances to bring our rook from a1 to the king side for future attack. Something like that is happening in the game. Black plays bishop f6, now rook a3. Now knight b8 is played, black tries to go sometimes knight c6 and knight b4, but white is just attacking here with queen g4 move, ignoring all of opponent's moves. Knight c6 and bishop goes to e2. Idea is to put our rook on h3 and attack the king. That's how white is winning in this game in a few moves. Let's now go ahead and see the next one. This is a test position for the daily lesson bishop b1 idea. It was about situations when, with unusual and strange move, we're locking opponent's heavy pieces at the edge of the board. Now it's a perfect spot, and in this game Smyslov is playing bishop b8. The rook on a8 is hanging. If black takes on b8, we're staying with an extra exchange. But as well, there are no other options to protect the rook. If black tries to go queen d5 and protect the rook through the diagonal. Bishop on e7 is hanging, and that's why after bishop b8 move in this position, white is winning. It's a very nice tactical pattern. Out of my experience, I can say very often players are missing these kind of strange moves. Let's now go ahead and see the next example. This is a test position for the daily lesson knight as a blockader. It was about situations when we were blocking the passed pawns with our knight. Why? The knight is the best defender and blocker of the pawn, we already know from the daily lesson. Now you were asked the question how to transfer this knight to d6 square in order to block pawn on d5. If going knight e7, unfortunately it's not working out, because here we're allowing white to play d6, and white queen is getting activated. For example, if we now go knight c8, queen d5 check is coming, and pawn on e5 is hanging in this case. Otherwise, after d6, if we go knight c6 and protect the pawn, there is now queen d5 check, and still we are blocking this pawn with our queen. Now this queen on d5 is very strong, and for all of these reasons we are not satisfied with this outcome as well. At the beginning, black plays differently. Now we're going knight h8 move, and idea is that after d6, now we'll go knight f7. Knight is protecting pawn on e5 after queen d5 threats. At the same time, we can capture pawn on d6 with our queen already. That's why after knight h8, white is not pushing the pawn, and after king f2, we are successfully playing knight f7 and putting knight on d6 with a nice blockade. Now it's stopping the d5 pawn from advancement, as well attacking pawn on c4 all the time. Let's now go ahead and see our next example. This is a test position for the daily lesson, Hidden Crosspin. Very nice tactical pattern. This was the homework position. If now we're trying for white to checkmate through the 8th rank with the tactical queen c8, it's not working because there is rook c8 and queen f8. Black is going for an equal endgame and making a draw. That's the reason that we're going for a beautiful crosspin tactic and starting with rook a6 move. Now, black cannot capture the rook on c2 because queen is hanging. As well, after rook a6, black cannot capture the rook on a6 because now with rook c8 check, we are already winning a lot of opponent's pieces. Queen f8 now is the only move. We take, play queen c8 check. After king e7, capturing on b7 with a check and taking the rook on a6, staying with the clear extra queen. Suddenly, after rook a6, black is lost. Only way for black try to defend is protecting this rook on c6. If black goes for rook bc7, we already have rook a8 check, since there is no longer pawn on the a file. And now after rook c8, we're taking and winning the game again. Otherwise, after rook a6, if black plays rook to b6 now, we can play rook to c8 check, and again take the queen, winning the game. Crosspin is a very nice tactical resource, and again I will tell you, opponents are very often blundering it. Be careful and use it in your games. Now let's go ahead and see the next position. This is the test position for the daily lesson, Non-Standard Exchange Avoidance. It was about the topic when opponents' pieces are interacting with each other and taking the space, which is required for one piece. We are avoiding this exchange and leaving two pieces on the board. In the game, Zukertort played in this position f3 and allowed knight d2 exchange. My recommendation is now to play knight to b1, leaving these both knights on the board. Now they are taking squares of each other. We are threatening to go f3 and throw this knight to a dangerous g5 spot. There, sometimes it can be trapped. That's why black has to play now knight d7, but after f3, knight f6 and knight c3, white is keeping the knight on the board, meanwhile black knights are still taking the space of each other. It's a very nice technique how to avoid unnecessary exchanges and leave bad pieces for opponent. Let's now go ahead and see the next one. This is the test position for the daily lesson, go g3 or g6 first while attacking. It's an attacking technique when, with your pawns, you are trying to destroy the pawn chain of opponent, and a nice option how to push. Instead of going a5 and losing pawn on b5, I offer you now to play b6 move immediately. Black cannot take with the c pawn because there is a pin, and only way for black to react is to play a takes b6. And now we are going a5 move, breaking opponent's pawn chain. If black here takes, with rook a5, we are creating decisive threat through the 8th rank. When we are attacking, have such a strong pieces aiming for opponent's king and open line like the a1, black's position is lost. After a5, if black tries to go b5 and keep the a file closed, it's still not working. We continue with a6. Now, if black takes, it's leading to the same consequences. The open a file is enough to win. Otherwise, after a6, if black continues pawn b6, we are winning. White goes a7, trying to promote a queen, and after king b7, the least we are having is e5 check, winning the knight on d6, and as well the attack, which is still going on. Black has now two chances to survive, and we are winning. Let's go ahead and see the next position. This is a test for the daily lesson, Flexible Bishop. It was about a bishop which is fulfilling an important mission, But it's already done and is going to a new position. Now it's white to move. If we pay attention, opponent has a pawn chain on d5 and c4, which we can attack with our bishop through the light squares. Before this, white plays bishop a4 check, leaving opponent's king without chances to castle, because now if knight c6, this pawn will be lost, and after check, black has to go king f8. Already, bishop is down on a4 diagonal, and that's why now it's going to d1, bishop f3, and already attacking pawn on d5. It's always very important to pay attention. If our piece is even staying strong in one spot, we may figure out that there is a better option. Or, let's say if the piece was doing well on one square for a long while, maybe for some reason it's already not necessary there. So we need to pay attention and improve its position again. Now let's go ahead and see our next example. This is the test position for the daily lesson, creating back rank problems. And this was a tricky one. I'm sure many of you started this with queen g6, and it's also the first move I'm paying attention to. With the tempo, we're forcing our opponent to take on g6, we take back with the pawn, and after king g8 play rook a7. If now black takes, we're mating with rook d8 because g6 pawn is creating some back rank problems for opponent king. After rook a7, black cannot take, and this all looks very attractive, and it's absolutely fine if you thought that after rook f8 and rook d7, white is winning. I was having the same thoughts, but suddenly engine shows that after rook f5, this position is drawish. The thing is, now any check through the 8th rank, black goes back, rook f8. So only option for white is to take the pawn on g7. But now, after king h8, it's a bit difficult to find the further ideas. This is a bit complicated engine line and not really necessary to pay attention to this. On top of everything, at the beginning, white has a better way of winning instantly. Let me show you. Instead of starting with queen g6, we are beginning with rook a7. Still, black cannot take because after queen g6 check, we are again forcing black to take on g6, and after pawn takes, making the same mate through the 8th rank. That's why, after rook a7, cannot take as we figured out, and at the same time, queen g7 checkmate is hanging. Now, black goes rook g8 and there is a big difference. If you haven't seen it previously, you can pause the video and try to find how to win here for white. This is the difference that rook is already on f8, and after queen g6 check, take, we play hg6. After king h8, white is winning with f6 move in this position. The thing is, now black cannot take back because rook h7 is mating. Otherwise, after f6, we have a mating threat. For example, if black goes rook b6, with an idea after f7 to capture on g6 with a check, we are winning after rook b6 in a nice way. You can pause the video another time and try to find it. Now white takes on g7 with a check, forcing rook g7, and is mating with rook d8, rook g8 and beautiful rook h7 checkmate. That's how white was winning, and all the time because of this g6 problem creator pawn. Now let's go ahead and see our next position. This is a test position for the daily lesson useless development. It was an exceptional topic. Most of the times we recommend you to develop the pieces, bring them into the game as fast as possible. But in some rare situations, we are having chances to attack on opponent's king. This time, instead of going bishop d2 move and trying to bring the rook on a1 in the game, which is also an option, white is starting an aggressive game right away with g4. The reason this is working, black king is almost necking. Very few pieces are nearby. We have advantage of bishop pair and good chances to find cooperation of our queen and light squared bishop. In some options with queen h3 and g5 moves, we can be creating mating threats. Also, a regular pawn storm is another option. Now, black in the game is played b5, but after h4, g5 is coming. It's happening before g5. Take, and after knight e8, white eventually plays queen h3. Now queen h7 is threat. If g6, we can be sacrificing the knight or as well doubling up our h-file heavy pieces, going rook e2 and rook h2. Many threats are coming and white is having a very nice attack, eventually winning the game. Once again, I will repeat myself, useless development is exceptional topic, and before going for that, we need to make sure our undeveloped pieces are not so important at the moment. Now let's go ahead and see the next position. This is a test position for a daily lesson Unstoppable Back Rank. And it's a tactical pattern about the weakness of the last rank for opponent's king. Now white's missing a piece, but trying to attack. If we begin with rook f8, trying to take and play queen c8 with a checkmate, or as well, if black takes, we're mating with rook f8 move in this position, it's not an option, because after rook f8, suddenly black plays queen e3. Now if we take and play queen c8 check, there is queen e8 move in this position. Black is covering all of the threats and winning. At the beginning, we need to start with a different sequence of the moves. Now white goes queen c8. And if here black takes, rook f8 is mating. Rook f8 and rook f8 checkmate. As well after queen c8, if now black plays queen e3, we are not going rook f8 move, because still there is bishop e8, and again all of the threats are covered. We cannot attack with the rook or the queen, because black is taking back with the queen as well. And that's why, after queen e3, white's taking queen g8, and after king g8 already mating with the rook, f8 move in this position. Usually, back rank problems are very dangerous. If opponent is having a king weakened through the last rank, you can pay attention to all of your attacking options. As well, if your king is vulnerable, try to take care of it and not blunder these kind of tactical ideas. Let's now go ahead and see the next one. This is a test position for the daily lesson Close the Flank. It was about situations when, let's say, we're playing in a center or the king side and opponent is trying to break through the other side. Now, we have a good center for black and king side is comparably quiet. White will try to break through the queen side here, and we need to take care of it in advance. Black plays now a5. Idea is that if a4 is happening, we go b4, closing the flank, and black will be organizing the game through the center. After a5, queen d3, and rook fd8. White now goes b3. And instead of great bishop c6 move, which was closing the flank, black made a mistake. First of all, let's see why this move is so good. Now, after a4, we're still going b4, closing the flank. And in the game, after b3, black goes for b4, which allows white to open the flank with a3 and use the game through the a file. For this mistake, later on black was punished and is losing the game. Now let's go ahead and see our next position. This is a test for the daily lesson Exchange Up What to Do. And we know that when we're having extra exchange, we need to open up the lines in order to activate our heavy pieces and give them a freedom. Now, any move for black will lead to an advantage. We'll have an extra material. But we're going d4, breaking this pawn chain and opening d and c files for the rooks. If white goes knight d4, we take and now bishop b4. Rook c3 is coming, queen d5, next rook goes to c8. Otherwise, after d4, if white is capturing with the pawn, we'll play knight b4. On the next move, rook c2 is happening with the tempo, again with a huge advantage for black. Let's now go ahead and see the next position. This is a test for the daily lesson typical knight f7, knight f2 sacrifices. Now it's white to move, and if we pay attention, black king is abandoned by the pieces, it's almost naked. As well, we're having our typical knight f7. We can make an improvement before going for this. If after knight f7, king f7, it's a bit unclear how to continue this attack for white, at the beginning we can do a little adjustment. We're starting with bishop h7 check, and only after king f8 taking knight f7. Here is the difference. When black takes back, we're getting queen g6 check because our bishop is on h7. And after king f8, capturing the pawn on e6. Now we're threatening a checkmate through g8 square, which is unstoppable. Either way, white is maining in a few moves. And it's a very common tactical pattern, so pay attention to this if you have further games. Now let's go ahead to see the next position. This is a test for the daily lesson backward rook moves. In this position, white has an attacking game because opponent's king is very much naked, no good pawn carriage, and white goes g4 with further complications and eventually is losing the game. Instead, white was having strong backward move with the rook. Rook goes to f3. Now we're attacking the bishop and creating threat with rook g3 check. With this nice backward move, white was getting a huge advantage, and this option was missed in the game. Often we want to push, go ahead, attack, destroy, kill, and so on, but not seeing this kind of backward decisions. We have to pay attention to all of our options, especially while attacking, and sometimes quiet backward moves are very much decisive. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson block pawn push with a knight. Now we have opposite side castles and both players are trying to attack. If it's white to move, white is going to play g4, pushing g5 and destroying our king side. That's why at the beginning we're preventing this pawn advancement and playing unusual knight g4 move, blocking this pawn, attacking on f2. In future, we may also fix this knight's position with f5 move in some specific conditions, but in general this is our main idea, and with this move, black temporarily stops white's pawn advancement, starting their own game on the queen side. Now, let's go ahead and see the next position. This is a test for the daily lesson block pawn push with the bishop. We're having our king in the center, which is not that great, but trying to attack on the king side through the f-file and using our pawns. Now, if it's white to move, they are going to play 4, b5, open up the a and b files for the rooks and bother our king. That's why, instead of starting the attack immediately, black goes bishop a4, blocking this pawn advancement. As well, after b5, we can take with the pawn, still keeping the queen side closed and starting our own game on the king side. Now let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson block pawn push with the rook. It's white to move now. Let me tell you one very useful technique. Sometimes if you don't know what to play, try to think of your opponent's threats. Here black wants to go g4. After rook g4, take pawn g4 and rook g4, open up the file, create some threats near to opponent's king. That's why at the beginning we need to prevent g4. We're going to block this pawn push and rook g4 is the move. Now white is getting very nice play through the light squares, our bishop is being opened, and it's a playable, interesting position, instead of allowing opponent to go g4 and get a good game. Let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson block pawn push with the queen. Now, again, opponent is planning to attack on our king, and if it's black to move, g5 can be very dangerous, coming g4, opening up the files, and our king will be in a huge trouble. We need to prevent this. h4 can be an option, but sometimes it will allow black to play g5 and open up the ranks in future. That's why, instead of giving all of these options, queen is becoming a strong blocker this time. Queen g5 will play. This advancement is no longer possible. Queen will be supporting rook e1 and rook e7 ideas. Also, all the time, it's attacking the pawn on g6. And that's why, with this knight blockading move, white's getting a huge advantage. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson Rook versus 2 pieces. If you remember, all the time in that daily lesson, we're saying that side with bishop and the knight needs to try keep as many pieces as possible. In that conditions, 2 pieces against the rook are playing better. If you don't remember why, check out the daily lesson. Now it's black to move, and rook e1 is a great move, exchanging the rook, which is very much decreasing power of white's pieces. In this way, black is eventually surviving in this game. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson and Passant move. And we have an interesting position. Black tries to attack on white's king, but we are having some problems through the f rank. White has a huge pressure and some annoying threats with the queen. That's why we are making a Passant f5 move. Now the file is closed and we are keeping different kind of threats. Rook h3 sacrifices open up the position and destroy opponent's king. When white takes, we go king f7. Even though we're losing a pawn and creating such a passed pawn for opponent, our king now is in a safety. We can say that this pawn is now our shield as well. Also, the g file is now open and black is getting huge threats. After queen e3 move, in the game, black is getting a very nice option. You can pause the video and try to find it. Now black plays bishop takes g2 and is winning. The reason is that after king g2, we have rook g8 check. Now after king h1, we are mating with queen b7, rook f3 and rook h3. Since there is a pin, white cannot take our rook. Otherwise, after rook g8 check, if white tries to run away with king f2 move, we play queen c2 check. And after king e1, the least we are having is to capture the queen with rook e4. As well, after queen c2, if white goes queen to e2, we are winning the queen with rook g2 move, forcing white to take and capturing the queen. That's how black, who by the way was Polgar Judith, one of the strongest female players in the world, is winning in this game. Let's now go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson Queen plus Knight attacking. It's about the power of the Queen and Knight couple when they are attacking. Why they are so strong you can check out in the daily lesson. Now white goes Knight h4 and with Knight f5 creating a threat of Knight e7 and most importantly Queen g7 checkmate. Black is in trouble. Going f6 or g6 is instantly destroying their kingside pawn structure. It's happening now, rook e6, but now knight f5 and we're still threatening a checkmate. Now f6 is not an option, because there is knight h6 check and we're winning the rook. Otherwise, after knight f5, black plays g6 and with knight h6 we're getting a winning position. King h7 and queen f4. Threatening knight g4, followed by queen h6, or as well knight g4, knight f6 ideas. In this nice way, with the power of queen and the knight, white instantly destroying opponent's position. Let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test position for the daily lesson Rook c3 attacking sacrifice. It's about the typical exchange sacrifice in some specific structures, and now it's a good time. We have opposite side castles, and both players are trying to have accelerated attack. Now, instead of playing some b5, b4 and creating a game on the queen side, we instantly begin the actions with rook c3 move. Pawn takes and queen c3. Now, all the time we're having annoying queen a1 ideas. As well now, white cannot go back with the queen and try to join the defense because queen a1 is mating. After queen c3, white plays king b1 move, and now we continue the attack with a5, using the fact there is no longer a knight on c3, as well our queen is no longer on a5. We're creating a4 threat in order to trap this bishop. How to face it? If white goes e4, it's already too much weakening white's kingside position. We go knight c4, creating a checkmate threat. And if white takes, we'll take back with the queen. Pawn on a4 will be lost, rook a6 and b6 is coming. With such a naked position of white king, they have no chances to survive. Otherwise, after a5, it's happening queen d2, and with queen d2 and rook d2, black is winning the bishop with a4 now. The thing is, after bishop d5, we go e6, and bishop b7 is not working as rook b8 is pinning this bishop, winning the piece and staying with two minor pieces versus the rook, which in this case is a huge advantage for black. Now let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson Rook c3 positional sacrifice. It's very similar to the previous one, but the difference is that this time when we're sacrificing the exchange, we're not planning to attack, but having some positional reasons. Now our knight on f6 is under attack. We can remove it, but it's better to play now rook c3. If white takes the knight and attacking our bishop at the same time, bishop on e3 is hanging, and after pawn g7, black is staying with an extra pawn. We're not taking on g7 right away, because after king g7, queen d4 is a huge blunder. We are losing our rook. Instead, after pawn g7, we are going rook to c8, and this pawn will be taken in a very near future. That's why, after rook c3, white has to accept it, but now we'll go knight d4. What we're getting? Weakened pawn for opponents, monster knight, bishop through the long diagonal is very strong, open c5 for the rook and pressure on the weaknesses again. Also, pawns on the king side are too much advanced for white and it's very much weakening their king. For all of these reasons, our positional exchange sacrifice is working out really well. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson Rook e6, Rook e3 exchange sacrifice. And you were asked whether Rook e6 now is working out good or it's not. We are playing now Rook e6 move because after pawn takes and knight g5, white's getting a huge game. Even though we sacrificed an exchange, we are getting weakened light squares near to opponent king, different kinds of dangerous threats. For example, now if black goes e5 and is trying to exchange this weakened pawn, we have queen b3 check. Because of this, black cannot go e5. Otherwise, after knight g5, we want to take. If black is protecting the pawn, we can go bishop h3, now threatening bishop e6 or knight e6, again with a huge positional compensation. And as well after knight g5, as it happened in this game, black is giving away the pawn on e6, knight d5. And when we capture, we get a monster knight, already a bishop and a pawn for the exchange, and a huge positional advantage, even though we're missing the exchange. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson Rook f6, Rook f3 exchange sacrifices. As you can see, we're reviewing different spots when we can give away the exchange, and it's one of them. We are already missing an exchange for our strong knight on d5, and since Rook f6 move is destroying opponent's kingside position, we're ready to give the second exchange away. After pawn takes, white goes queen h6. Now we're threatening knight f6, either winning the queen or mating. Rook e6 is the only way to protect the weakened spot, and now I will offer you to pause the video and try to continue here as white. Now we go bishop e7, nice tactical decision. If black takes, we're mating with knight f6, king h8 and queen h7. Otherwise after bishop e7, If black is doing any other move, for example queen to e8, we can play knight f6, rook f6 and bishop f6, again mating with queen g7 now. This is forcing black after this move to give away the queen, taking on e7, but now after knight e7, rook takes and queen f6, white is winning. Usually, when opponent has two rooks, they are good fighters against the queen, but it's not the case. Black's king's position is absolutely destroyed, this rook is not even developed yet. For this reason, this time, queen is much stronger. Now let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson, quarantine a knight. Now it's our move, and we can make a huge pressure on opponent's knight on g6. White starting with h5 move. Now, if knight goes to h4, we can play king g3, and this piece is trapped. The thing is that after pawn takes and takes back, bishop is limiting all of knight retreatment's abilities and is trapped on h4 square. After h5, it cannot go to e7 because this square is controlled by our rook, and the only option is now knight h8. Here we play g6 move, and keeping this knight in a deep quarantine. After hg6 and pawn takes back, now this knight is at the corner of the board, not having any single move. If black tries to play f5 and capture pawn on g6, it's still not an option. We go rook e6, and now black is paralyzed. Rook f6 or rook e8 is not working. In both scenarios, we are winning the pawn on f5, still keeping this knight out of the game and with a winning position for white. Let's now go ahead and see another example. We are going to continue the topic of quarantined pieces, and this is a test for the daily lesson, quarantine a rook. Now, black has very active pieces through the f file, but there is a concrete tactical reason why it's not working out well. White goes knight g2. Only available square for black is on d4, otherwise they are losing the exchange. And now we're sealing this rook on d4 with bishop e4 move. Basically, white is keeping this rook out of the game, and at some point, black will be forced to give away the rook for the bishop, staying with an extra exchange for white. Otherwise, this rook is all the time out of the game, and we're even staying with an extra piece. That's the reason, with this maneuver, white's getting a winning position. Now, let's go ahead and see the next one. This is a test for the daily lesson, quarantine a queen. It's white to move, and if we pay attention, black queen now is very much limited. It cannot go to b4, it's not having a huge space. Only option is the 5th ranked and the b6 square. Suddenly we have a move preventing all of these options. Now white goes bishop c5, closing the 5th ranked, and b6 square is now under our control. Another bad news for the queen is that it's gonna be trapped in a few moves. Now, white cannot play b4 because pawn on a4 will be hanging. But we can play something like queen d1 or queen c2, and we're already threatening to play b4, trapping opponent's queen. Black cannot do anything about this, and white is winning. Now, let's go ahead and see the last example for this video. This is a test for the daily lesson, what's the downside of opponent's move. In this position, black plays knight a5, and you were asked the question, what's wrong with this move? Let me help you now. Knight, when it's going to a5, is leaving rook on b8 without any defense. And here white's getting a very nice tactical option. We can play bishop h7 check. And after king h7, queen e5. Now g7 is hanging and rook on b8 as well. If black goes king h6 and attacking the knight, we're even waiting with queen g7, king h5, g4. And after king h4, queen h6 is finishing off the game. Otherwise, after queen e5, black has to protect the g7 spot, let's say f5, and we're winning the rook on b8, staying with an extra exchange. As I mentioned, this was the last position. GM Gabuzian was here with you. Thank you for your subscriptions, likes, and sharing this video with your friends. We appreciate it a lot. See you next time during our next daily lessons.